I never really thought that I would end up designing my own collection or owning a design house. I sort of became a designer by default.
Tell me that story.
Yeah, well, I've always really sort of enjoyed textiles, and that's really where sort of my story for each collection begins. And I travel quite extensively within the continent. I love going to markets. I love attending big sort of events, weddings, etc. And I've always been really passionate about fabrics and colors and how it's worn, etc. I was working in the industry where I felt there were very few Africans that were represented at the time, and Africa's presence was sort of kind of very vague, or maybe sort of reduced to just being something exotic or something different, but not really for what it was.
Why did you decide to call your clothing line African Mosaic? I mean, everybody knows Hanna Getanhe because you were such a successful supermodel. Why didn't you use your own name?
Oh, that's true. I never really ever thought of using my own name, because initially the way we started was because we wanted to bring different designers together from the continent, from the diaspora, designers that were established, designers that were sort of cutting edge, starting, emerging designs, etc. So it was really sort of a mosaic for me.
And you use this platform, you use your name as well and your experience to raise money for children in Ethiopia. Tell us a little bit about that, about the Ethiopian Children's Fund.
I started it 15 years ago. I had the opportunity to work with Pharmacists Without Borders when I was based in Paris. I took a trip to a refugee camp on the border of Ethiopia and Kenya, a camp called Moyale. And when I finally arrived at the refugee camp, and I ended up having to spend 7 days pretty much on my own, totally exposed and experiencing this, life-changing experience, I returned. I went back to New York, and I decided that I was going to do something. It wasn't very clear at that time, but naturally, I felt that I was moved. My life, I think, completely changed from then onwards. It became pretty much the #1 focus of my life until I had my own children. In the early days, I was quite naive, and I felt, okay, I'm going to open tons of schools around Ethiopia and then, spread it and go all around Africa and do all of that. It took much longer, and in fact, we just now completed the first academic cycle, full cycle of our first students.
And you had a graduation?
And we had our first graduation, and it was a wonderful, wonderful, emotional, and just a very proud moment, I think, for all of us involved, because even though it's just been one school, we feel that now we have learned so much during the 12 years. We have completed that first cycle, and we feel that we'll be able to do a lot more, not only for that particular school, that particular village, but perhaps throughout the country as well. We remain one of the poorest countries in Africa. We have a lot of children that are malnourished, who don't have access to proper education, especially in the rural areas, and so this remains one of the most important things in my life, and the great thing is there's the fashion to balance it off.